In the past 3 years, half of all arts journalists who are staffed have lost their jobs. Half, 50% in the last 3 years. And I think that each of us knows somebody, many more than one person, who has lost his or her job. And it's really, really awful. There might be 300,000 blogs out there, but 300,000 arts blogs out there. But where's the business model to support them? One of the most perplexing things about the current state of arts journalism is that the business models that support it are failing. We're in that awkward transition period where the old model is falling apart and the new ones are not quite yet in place, and we're all kind of feeling our way in the dark toward this. There are people who are getting paid, but there isn't, and maybe there never will be one absolutely perfect way that this all works out. There are probably going to be a multitude of ways. But we've all been part of endless discussions and debates, usually kind of angst-ridden and frustrated debates in which we hash and rehash and hash again, how are we going to get paid as arts journalists? So we asked András Szántó, who is the director of the NEA Arts Journalism Institute in Classical Music and Opera at Columbia University, and who's also the former director of the National Arts Journalism Program, and he is a professor at Sotheby's Institute of Art, to come here and host a conversation between someone from the for-profit publishing world and someone who is a leader in the foundation world. Richard Gringas is the CEO of Salon.com, which is one of the first online magazines. And it was originally an arts and culture publication, and it was one of the best. Its founders included some of the art staff from the San Francisco Examiner. And over the years, Salon has absolutely amazed everybody by staying alive. Reinventing the business model in order to survive is something that it seems to have been pretty good at doing. And Richard can speak from the trenches as someone who has been in there doing a lot of the hefting work that keeps people paid and keeps this Salon.com up. So we brought him on here. We also invited Deborah Marrow, who is the director of the Getty Foundation, which I should add funds our Getty Arts Journalism Fellowship Program at USC, and we are headed into our 8th year with that. So we asked her to come and to talk about with everybody, believing that arts journalism can't survive, can it or can it not survive as a for-profit business? Or is its only hope to be funded philanthropically? What do the foundations have to say about that? Deborah doesn't speak for the foundation world, but she has a keen understanding of how foundations work, their priorities, and where the arts and arts journalism fit in. András Szántó, Richard Gringas, and Deborah Marrow.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, or good whatever time of day it is in whatever time zone you are. We understand that you're being watched around the globe by over 1,000 people. The title of this panel, or this discussion, is The Business of Arts Journalism, and it's devoted to showing that its title is not an oxymoron. If those of you who are not here were in my position looking out at this audience, you'd see that this conference, much like its substance and its topic, is unlike anything we've seen before. Certainly I haven't been at a conference like this. And many of the arts journalism projects we've seen are unlike any of the arts journalism publications we know. What I see here in front of me is not a wood-paneled room with an august academic body convened to debate these issues, but a very technological scene with screens and cameras and people with laptops and hundreds of tweets flashing by on the screens. So this is all very good, but the question is, who's going to pay for cultural journalism? Before we move on, I'd like to say that although innovation is our topic today and everything we have seen is about digital journalism, I would perhaps like to give a shout out to those who are still working in print. And I am wearing my Print's Not Dead pin, which a student of mine gave me in a brazen act of whatever. So really there are only two ways to go. One is that the marketplace will somehow find a way to support arts journalism, some combination of eyeballs and markets and sponsorships and advertising and money. The other, if it doesn't, is a kind of non-profit philanthropic model that we see cultural journalism as part of a larger public purpose that somehow needs to be supported, perhaps not by the marketplace. As we've heard, we have two wonderful guests this afternoon, each of whom has spent a lifetime in these domains. Deborah Marrow, long career in cultural philanthropy at the Getty Trust, for many years now at the helm of its foundation, the Getty Foundation, and many other posts. And Richard Gringas, who, among many other positions in digital journalism, also spent the last years an advisor to a small company out here on the West Coast called Google. What's clear from what we've seen today is the future promises to be very different. Indeed, I think the present is already very different. It's unfamiliar, it's messy, it's surprising in many respects, and as the very last segment showed, it probably involves crossing over some boundary lines and some comfort zone boundaries that some may not find too comfortable crossing over. But for us, the question now will be, is it viable? Can it be sustainable? So Richard, you've spent a lifetime trying to sort this out. Over at Salon, you've tried every trick in the book. You've given away the content for free. You've built walls around it. You took down the walls. Will journalism, and especially cultural journalism, ever be viable and sustainable on the marketplace?
I don't think there's any question about that. I have huge optimism about the future of journalism in all forms. And I think it might be useful to... I was thinking last night about an early experience in my career. My first job out of college was with PBS in Washington. And I had the pleasurable job of screening documentaries and recommending them for acquisition. And in one early on that we bought was a wonderful profile by Jerry Bruck of the great muckraking journalist I.F. Stone. For those of you who don't know him, just an extraordinary guy, never worked in mainstream media, always broke stories because he was beholden to no one, and his means of distribution was a newsletter. And as part of that, I got to have lunch with him at his ramshackle little house in Washington. And he was just a fascinating gentleman. And towards the end of the lunch, he mentioned that he had recently ordered a Xerox machine, which was a fairly interesting and unique thing in 1973. And he says, remember what Mencken said? He says that there is freedom of the press, but only for those who own one. And he says, now I own one. I.F. Stone was a prototypical blogger. And he did great journalism. And I think that's a really powerful lesson. When I think of what's going on in our world today, as I said, I'm optimistic. I mean, I love newspapers. My father worked for the Providence Journal for years. I just always loved everything about them. But I think the thing to keep in mind, and there's all this Sturm und Drang today about the demise of newspapers, and so much pointing of fingers that it's Google's fault, it's Craigslist's fault. It's absolutely not the case. The reason for the demise of newspapers is the internet, because the internet made publishing open to everyone. The internet broke the monopolistic distribution models that newspapers in the last 40 years got very fat and sassy off of. But the internet also has allowed now, today, more people publishing and writing than ever before in the history of civilization. That's an extraordinary thing. And so to me, the law of numbers will simply state that there is no going to be area of content or journalism that is not going to get fulfilled online.